Good afternoon, everyone. This is Patrick Miller, staff writer for the UAS Magazine. I want to welcome everybody to our first webinar of the year, Aerial Assets, UAS in Law Enforcement. I want to thank you for your time and your attendance for tuning into our webinar today. I think we have a really great panel of quality presenters. They have experience in aviation, in unmanned aerial systems, in law enforcement, and a really, I think, fascinating broad range of perspectives on unmanned aerial systems. Our first presenter will be James Mackler. He's an attorney with Bowen McAllister Norton. He is a former U.S. Army helicopter pilot, a defense attorney, and a UAS law specialist. He'll be followed by Alan Frazier, who is not only a deputy Grand Forks Sheriff's Department, or deputy in the Grand Forks Sheriff's Department, but also an associate professor at the University of North Dakota School of Aerospace Sciences. And he is the chief UAS pilot with the Sheriff's Department, and he's also very well known in UAS law enforcement circles for his knowledge of the topic we have today. We also have Dean Attridge. He is the co-owner of Sentinel Air LLC. They're located in Alamogordo, New Mexico, and he has a great deal of experience in operating unmanned aerial systems for the civil, military, and law enforcement areas. And finally, we have Anthony Galante, who is the lead instructor for the Unmanned Safety Institute. He also has experience in law enforcement and is an instructor at the famed Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. So I'm very pleased to have all of them with us today. And before we get rolling, I just want to take care of a few housekeeping matters. One is that the webinar will be recorded and posted on the UAS Magazine website within roughly 7 days. And you can access that webinar if you want to listen to it again using the same login information that you used today to sign into the webinar. And as far as questions, there is a dialog box on the right side of your screen that will be active throughout the webinar. So if you have any questions for a particular speaker, just go ahead and type your question in. We are keeping track of them, and at the end of the webinar then we will use the any extra time we have to ask our presenters questions. And so they'll get to as many as we can with time permitting. I just want to go over a few, just a little bit of background. We thought that law enforcement, UAS law enforcement use was a logical thing to do because, just looking at the number of certificates of authorization issued by the Federal Aviation Administration, a little over 25% of them have gone to law enforcement organizations, local, county, and federal. And James Mackler is going to talk a little bit about that. But this has been a real frequent topic for our UAS Magazine team. Emily Asand wrote a story for one of our publications about Detroit Aircraft and their partnership with Lockheed Martin and the Indigo UAV that Lockheed Martin makes for law enforcement use. So that is something that we've covered quite some depth through the UAS Magazine. Not going to read through this whole list, but there are some potential uses for UAS by law enforcement. And I think there's probably others that some of our presenters may address that aren't on the list. But that picture actually was for one of the first stories I wrote for our magazine about a guy named Gene Robinson, who is a pilot and specializes in missing person searches. And it was a story that I did about their search for a missing woman in Texas, and how they got permission from the FAA to fly that. So that was kind of my first exposure to the topic of UAS and law enforcement. We also have a story, if you want to check it out today, on our website about a project at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi, where they've developed some software specifically for emergency management that is already being used by the university's police department. The next thing we're going to talk about, this will be what James Mackler addresses, and this is an admittedly out-of-date map, but it was from a study done by some professors at Embry-Riddle University looking at the different states and what they were doing in the area of UAS legislation and laws they were passed. And my guess, if they updated that map, that probably every one of those states would be filled in with some kind of activity going on in it. But again, a lot of our readers have told us that they like to hear about what's going on in other states, and so that's something else that we try to cover regularly. The other thing Al Frazier will be addressing is some of the operational experience that the Grand Forks County Sheriff's Department has had. They received one of the early certificates of authorization from the FAA and have a great deal of experience on that. And Al has a lot of great deal of information to share about that topic, about so how do you actually use these in practice, and what are some of the issues involved. We did another story that we had was about Alabama a few weeks ago, what they were doing to pursue a certificate of authorization through the FAA for law enforcement. Again, that's something that our readers say they want to know about, and so we try to cover those issues as they come up. And then Dean Attridge with Sentinel Air. There are a lot of technological developments going on all the time in the world of UAS. And Dean has an interesting perspective because right now they have a manned aircraft, which you can see in there. It's called the Sky Arrow. It's made by a company in Italy that I'm not going to try to say the name of. But they're actually working with their local sheriff's department and testing sensors and ground control systems, basically so they don't have to have an unmanned, they don't have to have a COA or any kind of exemption from the FAA to do that, because they are doing all this testing in a manned aircraft. And also it shows you in that picture, you can see what the aircraft will be looking like when it gets converted to be an unmanned aerial vehicle. So it's kind of an interesting approach that that Dean will be sharing his perspective on. And finally, there's a lot of questions in the law enforcement community about, what's the best equipment to use to what purpose, and then how do you get trained for that? And that's why we have Anthony Galante here today from USI, and he will be talking about some of those issues. Just earlier this week, I visited with him about the proposed FAA regulations for small unmanned aerial systems and the requirement for certification for that. And I'm sure that's going to be something that law enforcement agencies are interested in. So I want to introduce our first speaker this afternoon, and that is James Mackler, who is an attorney, and he will be giving us an overview of state and federal UAS law. So thanks for joining us today, James. It's all yours.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for all of you all who are attending, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have at the end of this presentation. I'm going to start by giving an overview of the extent of UAS deployment in the United States right now, and then I'll go on to talk about some specific federal aviation rules and then state statutes. And I'm going to spend some additional time on the case law that's developed regarding Fourth Amendment privacy issues, because there's a lot that's developed in regard to manned aircraft that's going to apply to unmanned aircraft. The extent of UAS deployment over the past couple of years has been largely, although not exclusively, a result of Customs and Border Protection loaning their Predator aircraft to other law enforcement agencies. As you've already seen, Customs and Border Protection is one of the agencies that got one of the first COAs, and of course they have the most sophisticated UASs, certainly operating stateside. They've loaned out their Predator, I think it's in the neighborhood of hundreds of times, to everyone from the FBI to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. There are a lot of other agencies. I didn't list them all, but this gives you an idea of how an agency that either doesn't have a COA or certainly doesn't have the same resources can take advantage of resources available to Customs and Border Patrol. So this case got a lot of publicity. It's new, and most news agencies are saying this is the first UAS-supported arrest in the country, and I'd be curious to hear from other panelists later if they agree with that. But this is a situation where a Predator drone simply conducted surveillance and reported back to a SWAT team when it was safe to make an arrest on some rural property, and then the SWAT team was able to go in and make the arrest. So the drone provided the surveillance, or the Predator provided the surveillance in this case, allowing them to make the arrest. This person has now been convicted, and to the best I can determine, the role of the unmanned system really had nothing, no real role to play in the conviction other than the arrest. It wasn't used to gather any sort of evidence, for example. So there weren't very many legal issues surrounding that. There have been many COAs issued, and it's hard to know specifically how many COAs have been issued to law enforcement because it's not easily available. There have been some FOIA requests made, and so when those get answered, we get some more information, but that information is old. So this is a partial list of law enforcement agencies that have received COAs to use unmanned systems in law enforcement. You can see it represents a lot of different states. It represents both police departments, sheriff's departments, federal agencies such as the FBI, and Customs and Border Protection, DOJ, and on from there. Needless to say, there's been public resistance to the use of unmanned systems, and I think that the most well-known resistance was probably out of Seattle. Washington State got a COA and obtained some quadcopters without getting the public's buy-in and approval prior to doing so. And so once it became known that they had the UAS systems and they might be using them, there was a lot of public resistance until finally politicians did an about-face. And as you can see here, they intended to return the vehicles to the vendor, but it took longer than they anticipated that it would. They received them from, I think, as part of a DHS grant. So this is a blog posting by Seattle PD saying they've ended their program, they're not going to use the vehicles, they're trying to return them. And then not too much longer, they showed up in LA. And so this is a news story about how the LAPD acquired the vehicles from Seattle, and they hadn't deployed them yet either as of November 16, 2014. So one of the big things that needs to be addressed, and it's not so much a legal issue as it is a public policy issue, but even where law enforcement agencies have the authority to deploy unmanned assets, if they don't deal properly with the public perceptions, they can get a lot of pushback. And a lot of that pushback has really been reflected in legislation that's either passed or been pending. Right now we've got, I think the current count is 20 states that have enacted some sort of statute specific to unmanned aerial systems. It's probably a little bit more. And almost all of those specifically limit the use of unmanned systems by law enforcement. And what they do is they really limit it far more than it would otherwise be limited by traditional case law and statutes dealing with law enforcement. And I'm going to get into that a little bit here. These are not all of the different statutes dealing with law enforcement, but these are a good representative example. And the typical model that the states use is to say that evidence obtained using an unmanned system cannot be used in court if it was obtained without a warrant. So basically they're imposing a warrant requirement on the use of unmanned systems. And that's contrary to really well-developed law enforcement case law, where if a police officer gathers evidence, particularly evidence in plain view, then that evidence is generally able to be used in court. Now, if that same officer or a UAS pilot gathers evidence of something in plain view using an unmanned system, by state law in many states, it won't be allowed. But the states have also created a lot of exceptions to that general rule. Many of them, if you look at Alaska, for example, say you have to have a warrant or a judicially recognized exception. Those include things like emergencies and plain view. So I don't even know how that is going to work out in Alaska or in these other states that have a judicially recognized exception. They almost all permit unmanned systems to be used in search and rescue for missing persons, in emergencies to respond to terror attacks. There are a few sort of interesting outliers, and one that stands out for me is Idaho, for example, says you have to have a warrant to use evidence or to use a drone to gather evidence unless it's being used in a drug investigation. So Idaho's war on drugs has made a special exception for unmanned systems. Some states, Colorado, just failed to pass a similar statute requiring warrants for unmanned systems. So there may be the pendulum is swinging a little bit in the other direction. As a criminal defense lawyer, I'm always looking for these cases to come up, and so far as I can tell, no one is being prosecuted using evidence gathered by an unmanned system, and no law enforcement agency has been subject to any kind of civil penalty for using an unmanned system improperly. Once that starts to happen, and it will, we'll get some case law and some legal interpretation of these statutes and have a better idea of what they really mean. The privacy concerns surrounding unmanned systems really ultimately boil down to Fourth Amendment concerns, and that's the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, which means that if you are somewhere where you have a reasonable expectation of privacy, law enforcement can't search that location without a warrant. So this is the warrant requirement within the Fourth Amendment. And there's that requirement, that is the interpretation of the Fourth Amendment, has been examined for years, ever since the Constitution. And the trick now is to apply it to a new technology. So there are traditional exceptions to the warrant requirement. Consent, it's always permissible to search someone's private property with their consent. Plain view, emergency are two other ones. And I'm going to focus really on plain view here because I think that's the one that's going to apply most of the time to unmanned systems, and that's where most of the case law has developed regarding manned aircraft. So law enforcement has been using manned aircraft, helicopters and airplanes, obviously, for a long time to gather evidence. And traditionally, if something can be seen from an aircraft, it can be used in court, even if there wasn't a warrant obtained prior to gathering that information. That's been how the law has traditionally developed. And one of the first cases to address that was an airplane flying over a fenced backyard where someone was growing marijuana. And the Supreme Court basically said, look, any member of the flying public could look down and see that. So this person had no reasonable expectation of privacy, and therefore a warrant was not required. That continued to develop. The case law continued a couple of years later, where I think it was the EPA, flew over a chemical plant and used some very high-powered optics to survey the chemical plant. And so here the Supreme Court again said that's okay, even without a warrant, because even though this is sophisticated surveillance equipment and the human vision is enhanced to some degree, it still doesn't really give rise to a violation of the reasonable expectation of privacy. That would be different, the Supreme Court said, if some kind of electronic device were used that could see inside of the house, for example. Then, the Supreme Court continued to expand this by saying that a helicopter could look into a greenhouse and see, see marijuana growing, and that was fine as long as the helicopter was, and this is important for UAS law, as long as the helicopter was where it was allowed to be, that is flying within all applicable regulations, and within navigable airspace, then anything that could be seen from that helicopter could be considered plain view and wouldn't require a warrant. And then finally, there was a little bit of pushback most recently in this most recent case where law enforcement was using heat sensing technology, thermal imaging. And the Supreme Court said this does constitute intrusion into the reasonable expectation of privacy. But the reason the court said that primarily was because it was technology not widely available at the time. And that indicates or would suggest that as such technology becomes more widely available, a person's reasonable expectation of privacy as to even the thermal signature of their home may be reduced to the point where we say someone doesn't have a reasonable expectation of privacy in their home if the information gathered can be gathered from widely available sensors. And as you all know, unmanned aerial systems and very sophisticated sensors are becoming very widely available, and this is going to really be a challenge for the courts to interpret given the past case law and the evolving technology. So, to summarize, there's no reasonable expectation of privacy when something is observable by the flying public using equipment generally available in compliance with law and regulation without sense-enhancing technology that allows a view to the inside. And so under this case law, if there weren't these state laws requiring warrants, most evidence could probably be gathered with an unmanned system without requiring a warrant, without being in violation of the Fourth Amendment. So traditional Fourth Amendment protections really don't provide what the public seems to be seeking in terms of privacy. And so legislatures are reacting with more statutory protections, but law enforcement is demanding increased use. Regulations are evolving, technology is improving, and as a lawyer, but also as the end user, I think that we're all going to benefit either as case law develops in the states interpreting these statutes or from some sort of uniform or model state code so that every state can create very similar statutes, because right now really the states are all across the board in terms of what type of uses are permissible by law enforcement. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the other presenters and to answering your questions at the end of this presentation.
Thanks very much, James. As always, I appreciate your insights on legal aspects of unmanned aerial systems. Our second speaker this afternoon is Alan Fraser, Associate Aviation Professor at the University of North Dakota Aerospace School, which I'll add is also a very well-known school throughout the world for aviation, and he is also a Grand Forks County Sheriff's Department deputy, and he's going to talk to us about some of the operational experience that their Sheriff's Department has had with unmanned aerial systems. So thanks very much for being here, Alan. It's all yours.
My pleasure, Patrick. Thanks for having me. I'm going to go in a little different direction here, talk a little bit about our operational experience at the Grand Forks Sheriff's Department that was enabled by the Law Enforcement UAS Research Project. So as the slide says, welcome to the future, and it doesn't really matter what Al Fraser or anyone else thinks about small UAS. They're coming, and whether we like them or not. So, the way I think to get our arms around this technology is to gain a higher level of understanding of it, and in some of the things that James was discussing as far as state legislature is concerned, is to take an active role in that and to let our congressional representatives know how we feel about them. A little bit about our program here in Grand Forks. It's a little bit of a Frankenstein because it's a collaboration between the University of North Dakota, the Grand Forks Sheriff's Department, and two UAS manufacturers, Aero Environment out in California and Dragonfly Innovations up in Canada. A little bit about the Sheriff's Department. We're probably the poster child for the use of UAS because we're large enough to have an occasional need for aerial assets, but not large enough to be able to afford it. We protect 1,800 square miles, which is rather large, but in the unincorporated part of the county, we only have approximately 7,500 residents. And so a Sheriff's Department of 48 personnel, with only 32 of those being full-time sworn deputies, is responsible for protecting that rather large area. We are part of some regionalized, specialized teams, and that's one of the things North Dakota has done very well in law enforcement, is that because really no jurisdiction in the state is large enough to be able to have standalone specialized teams, the state of North Dakota has regionalized the state into 4 regions. We happen to be in the northeast region, and so our agency, the Sheriff's Department, participates in a regional SWAT team, in a regional hostage negotiations team, an EOD bomb squad, a water operations team, a UAS unit, and a narcotics task force. So a little bit about the Odegaard School. Obviously a lot of information on this particular slide, but suffice to say that we've been in the business for quite a while. We were founded back in 1967 with a modest 2 aircraft, and we've now grown to approximately 140 aircraft, multiple simulators, approximately 1,400 aerospace students, and we graduate approximately 250 commercial pilots annually. The Northern Plains Unmanned Aircraft Systems test site, one of the 6 federally designated UAS test sites, is based here in Grand Forks, and they actually maintain our offices here in our School of Aerospace. We also had the country's first UAS degree program that was founded a few years ago, and that program has now grown to approximately 140 students that are pursuing a baccalaureate degree in aerospace studies with an emphasis in unmanned aircraft systems. The collaboration, as I said, involves the Sheriff's Department, the university, and 2 manufacturers. And we started with the goal of trying to develop a concept of operations for the law enforcement use of UAS. Wanted also to develop training curriculums for law enforcement UAS pilots and sensor system operators, as well as overall to just look at the effectiveness of small UAS tasked to law enforcement missions. And a final kind of cherry on top of the sundae was to be able to bring law enforcement aviation to a portion of the nation that didn't currently have it available. Again, a lot of information here, but we currently hold 5 certificates of authorization from the FAA. 3 of those allow 24/7 operations, so I believe we're one of the only agencies in the nation that's able to do nighttime UAS operations. We didn't start off with that, though. We started off very small with training COAs in a very defined rural area, getting factory training, coming up with a policies and procedures manual, segueing from that factory training into specific scenario training, working together as a team on crew resource management between our pilots and our sensor system operators, working with specialized teams in the county like SWAT and water operations to introduce them to our operations and also to determine what their needs were, as well as providing 2 hours of in-service training to every Grand Forks deputy sheriff and Grand Forks police officer so they would know what our capabilities were, but equally important, what our limitations were. The slide is slightly out of date. It says that we've flown 16 missions to date. We actually flew a 17th mission this weekend. That was to provide video and still photographs of an officer-involved shooting scene that occurred here in Grand Forks this past weekend. This is the area that our COAs cover. It's the 16 northeastern counties that comprise North Dakota, and again, that's our Northeast Region Mutual Response Area. And the FAA worked very closely with us in defining that area. Our rationale for it was that the Grand Forks Sheriff's Department had a responsibility to respond anywhere in that region to provide mutual aid, and the FAA found the validity of that argument and granted us a COA for all 16 counties. Since then, we've actually operated outside of that. We went over to Bemidji, Minnesota, approximately a month and a half ago to assist the Beltrami County Sheriff's Department with photography of an explosion site where there had been a propane gas explosion at a residence. And once again, the FAA worked very closely with us in granting an emergency certificate of authorization for us to conduct that operation outside our normal operating area. When we talk about the aircraft that we're operating, they truly are small UAS, and we'll just quickly look at the 4 that we have in our program. This is the Dragonflyer X6. This was the first aircraft we received from Dragonfly Innovations up in Canada. This is Dragonflyer X4ES. This is one of the principal aircraft that we use now. It's we kind of think of it as an X6 on steroids. It's able to carry a larger load. It has a gyro-stabilized payload. It has a a larger battery, so we have longer mission times with this particular aircraft. Then we have 2 aircraft from AeroVironment in California. This is a very time-tested machine here. It is the AeroVironment RQ-11 Raven. Several thousand of them have been sold to the U.S. Department of Defense and have been used extensively overseas by all branches of the military. The version we have is slightly updated to this. It has a gimbal payload that is in the nose cone, so we actually have an infrared sensor and an electro-optical camera in this gimbal payload, which makes it a very, very useful set between that payload and that particular aircraft. And then the final aircraft that we utilize is also another AeroVironment product. It's the Q, spelled rather differently there with the Q. This is their newest aircraft that they have manufactured. We worked with them from really the genesis of this aircraft in adapting it over from a DARPA project to its newest mission set, which is to help emergency services type organizations in trying to get an aerial perspective over incidents. Again, a lot of information on this slide, but just want to make the point that when you're looking at starting a unit or beginning a research project, that you have to have certain midterm and long-term goals in mind. And so we broke the research project into 3 phases. Starting way back in 2010, we just set out to identify manufacturers that we could partner with, seek COAs to operate their aircraft, select and train pilots, and then move into phase 2. In phase 2, we went out to the greater law enforcement community and drew in sensor system operators from a number of different agencies in the northeast North Dakota area. We reached out to the FAA and requested COAs for the much larger area that we might have to respond to, and we refined and published our Grand Forks Sheriff's Department UAS unit policies. And then a lot of work was already done for us because we were partnering with the University of North Dakota that has a very robust flight training program. We assimilated many of their existing policies, including the requirement to have every flight dispatched by a dispatcher who's not on scene. And that's turned out to be a very useful safety precaution for us, because the flight determination of safe or unsafe is not being made by people that are in the throes of the battle. It's also has to be concurred with a dispatcher who's, you know, in a nice, safe, warm office at the Grand Forks Airport, and we have to actually have done a risk analysis and mitigated any risks we've identified. And the dispatcher, who's a highly experienced UND flight instructor, has to agree with our assessment that the flight can be made safely. Then we went into phase 3, which was the actual operational deployment of the aircraft. That phase began when we got what the FAA considers operational COAs. So prior to March of 2013, we had training COAs that allowed us to do factory training and scenario-based training of our operators and sensor system operators. Then we were issued our operational COAs in 2013, and that was following a 3-day operational inspection by 2 FAA safety inspectors who came out from the UAS program office in Washington and actually conducted an on-site evaluation of all of our paperwork, met with all of our operators, actually got a tour of where the flights are dispatched from, where the aircraft are stored, reviewed all of our checklists and so forth, and then actually came out and watched an operational deployment on a simulated law enforcement incident. Ultimately, the phase 3 will conclude in July of this year. We've been gathering data now since, actually since 2010, but operational data since 2013. And so at the conclusion of the project, which will be the end of July of this year, we'll draft a law enforcement UAS concept of operations. We've already held 2 sensor system operator training courses in which we've trained 37 law enforcement and public safety UAS visual observers / sensor system operators. we've already done a number of pilot training courses, 2 of them internally for our personnel and 1 externally for the Illinois State Police. So that's given us a great deal of data and information from which to compile a white paper, which we will publish in the fall of 2015, which will hopefully synopsize the lessons learned in our program and assist other agencies that are interested in establishing a UAS unit. You know, every organization has to have a wiring diagram, and this is ours. Interestingly, we have another wiring diagram for the University of North Dakota and how we fit into their particular operation. So the fact that we have a foot in 2 different organizations that have a say about what we do has made it rather interesting in getting the unit up and operational. I'll leave this slide up for a couple of minutes because it's a listing of the 17 operational missions we've conducted. In addition to these 17 operational missions, we've conducted over 250 training missions that closely parallel things that we have done or would be asked to do in the field. And so you can see there's quite a variety of locations and quite a variety of different types of scenarios or missions that we've accomplished. Probably one of the most telling columns is the tasks, and those are coded 1 through 7 with the key on the lower left side of the slide as to what type of incidents we responded to, and then on the right-hand side it tells just a little bit more about the mission. As you can see, exact locations to maintain the confidentiality of the agencies that we served and the people that were involved in those incidents have not been placed on this, but I hope this gives our viewers out there on the webinar at least an idea of some of the wind conditions, temperature conditions, and types of missions that we've conducted with the aircraft. We really rely upon safety, and you know, all flying organizations say safety is #1, and we do that as well, and we really take it to heart. So this graphic gives a little bit of an idea of some of the different policy documents that we're bringing to play when we fly a mission. So everything from the basic requirements within our COA to FAA regulations and guidance documents to our UND UAS Research Compliance Committee, which is a group of 15 individuals representing the university, the public safety community, elected government officials, appointed government officials, and citizens at large. And so we've really tried to deal with the transparency issue and the privacy issue by running all of our mission sets through that committee. So they're not made aware of the specifics of a mission that we're flying, but they have approved 6 specific mission sets. And every mission that we've flown to date has been in compliance with their direction. And they have given us some direction on signposting and notifying the public in certain instances, which we've complied with. So in order to do this right, we found that getting the public involved and not making this that sniper on the hill scenario is really, really important. Because if your community does not want you to have these, the ultimate answer is you shouldn't have them. And so involving the community and getting the boogeyman out of the picture, I think has been very helpful to us. Again, a graphic just showing what happens from the time that we get a request that goes to our public safety answering point to the time that we debrief on the mission. And every mission, whether it be a training mission or an actual mission, a debrief occurs afterwards to identify lessons learned and try to benefit from that particular mission to add to our operational capability on future missions. Some of the preliminary findings from our research: 1, again, safety must be paramount, as must be community involvement. Do not try to make a secret of your unit. We've been very open and transparent with the press and been involved in dozens of interviews for newspaper articles, television programs, everything from the Sunday morning, CBS Sunday morning show to local cable programs here in the Grand Forks area. And other than giving out sensitive operational details, we answer any question that is asked of us in the most candid way possible. Some of the things on utilizing the aircraft that we found is ease of operation is very, very important. You know, your average police officer and deputy sheriff today has numerous pieces of technology in their squad car that they have to learn to use, and this is just one more piece of equipment that they may be tasked to use. So making it simple and taking the complexities out of it is going to help us ensure that it's operated properly and safely. The next is it's got to be reliable. especially during the beginning of UAS, the last thing we want to do is respond out to a call where a deputy has asked us to help them and us to have to tell them that we can't help them because we're maintenance. We're really lucky because we have multiple airframes here, but an agency that's looking at trying to run a program with a single aircraft needs to be very careful about their ability to reliably respond to requests for assistance. The next is, these are small aircraft. They have wind limitations. They tend to be up in the 20 to 25 knot range for all of the airframes that we're flying. When we get above that, we cancel flights. We weather them. And in that list of 17 missions we were called out on, you may have noticed that there were 2 that we had to decline the missions because the wind was too high here. And then finally, manufacturer support. My understanding is there's over 400 UAS manufacturers worldwide out there now. My question would be how many of them will be there on the horizon in 2 or 3 years from now. I think it would be really detrimental to an agency to have purchased an airframe and then to find that the manufacturer went under 6 months after they bought that airframe. They're not going to get that really essential manufacturer support, parts support, technical advice, and so forth. Finally, Patrick touched on it a little, but some of the things that we've used in it are crimes in progress. We have not used it on alarm calls yet, but that is a very legitimate use of it to check roosts on an alarm call, a burglar alarm call. We have searched for persons, both lost persons as well as crime suspects, and we have used it extensively in accident and crime scene photography. In fact, that has been our #1 use. Over all the other missions, we're called out more often at traffic accident scenes and major crime scenes. We've worked 2 homicides and an officer-involved shooting, as well as a serious sexual assault crime scene. Some other operations it could be used for would be traffic control at special events, assessing disaster scenes, and hazmat monitoring. I do want to make the audience aware that the long-awaited Notice of Proposed Rulemaking was issued by the FAA on 22 February. It was published in the Federal Register on 23 February. The deadline for comments on that is 24 April. It is well over 100 pages. Anyone who wants to review that and make comments can simply go to this easy website, www.regulations.gov. Once you get there, there's a very robust search engine. If you just put in UAS NPRM, it will bring up a PDF, or you can open a PDF of the entire NPRM, and there's also an easy link there you can click on to make your comments. And I would strongly recommend that everyone that has, a dog in the fight for UAS goes in, reviews that, and sends their comments to the FAA. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. That was a great talk and a lot of interesting information in there. Our next speaker will be Dean Attridge. He's the co-owner of Sentinel Air in New Mexico, and he'll be talking about some of their experience with working with law enforcement and some of the technologies that they're developing with their manned, currently in hybrid aircraft. So thank you, Dean, for being with us today.
Patrick, and thanks for inviting me. And this should be quite a contrast to Alan's because I'm at the other end of the scale. As you can see, my aircraft sat in front of you is 900 pounds without the crew in. So, I kind of cheat because my ground control station is actually is mounted in the aircraft. But we very much view ourselves as an unmanned system, and that may sound kind of crazy. We're working at the moment for security, which I include law enforcement. We do some environmental work as well and emergency services, and we are a commercial contractor. We contract ourselves out to these people. That allows a lot of cost sharing for someone who normally couldn't afford air support. So let's talk about rural New Mexico and the Sheriff's Department in rural New Mexico. They do not have the budget for air support, but they again are required to cover a huge amount of area. Terra County, where I'm sat now, is a huge county, and in order to cover that pretty wild desert country, they would very much like air support, and therefore we're working closely with them in providing that to them. A little bit about our background. We're actually a whole bunch of military aviators who got together to take our skills into civilian life. Between us, we've flown all of those platforms there. Most of us have both manned and unmanned experience. And actually out of that experience is why we elected to go manned and then eventually unmanned. Our stuff is, all of our experiences on large platforms hovering over cities or out in theaters of operation. And therefore we're used to operating big stuff. We all have, fortunately, commercial licenses and things of that nature. And therefore we can start at the other end of the scale. And once the rules allow us to go unmanned, we can progress onto that. So some of the security work we've done is mainly aimed at law enforcement. We are doing some private security stuff, particularly with the oil industry out here in New Mexico. There's a lot of very remote infrastructure that tends to disappear in the middle of the night if you don't regularly visit it. And then also back to the military as a go. And actually, ironically, we've ended up with a contract to become a surrogate UAV, which is us pretending to be who we used to be, which is quite an interesting spin on life. So let me not quote you what law enforcement can do or air can do for law enforcement. Let Chicago police do it. Their thoughts and their justification for their air unit, which is primarily helicopters, was number one, that it virtually ended all high-speed pursuits. Now, my aircraft's not fast. You could outrun it on a motorcycle. It's only 100 knot aircraft. But I can go in straight lines where vehicles can't. One of the interesting ones is they commented very highly, and I'd agree with this, that it documents offenders' action, which I'm sure James could probably comment on, allowing for more successful convictions. If video evidence is worth its weight in gold in court. But also importantly, it can documents the officer's actions as well, and therefore that can quite often reduce claims for a local law enforcement agency, especially when you're talking some of the smaller agencies. It can provide an overt presence. It can be an efficient command and control tool. And when we get to the stage, and we're not quite there yet, to offload the video down over the internet, then that will be a real asset to any command and control infrastructure. And they claim that one aviation unit can see about what 26 officers can see on the ground. And situation awareness, as that bottom point is the key here. And that was true in the military, and it's still true for law enforcement. If you get an eye in the sky, it can really be a force multiplier. And that's where most of the benefits in aviation generally lie, and where UAVs and will certainly end up. Here's a little still from an incident that we were involved in not long ago. It was a drugs-related incident, and actually we were aware that the building that the officers were visiting was being used for lots of different purposes, and you've all seen Breaking Bad, so you can imagine what kind of purposes were going on there. But actually we were aware that they were hiding stuff out in the desert, and after the initial support to document everything as the warrant was pushed forward and the officers went onto the property, we were then tasked to push out into the desert and locate stuff that could be used to move or hide, or see if we could see anything that would be involved in drug movement. This was an ATV that we spotted down in an arroyo into a wadi, or a desert ditch, eroded by the water that we get out here a great deal. And this ATV was hidden there. When we eventually guided the officers onto it, and it was some distance from the house, we found out that it had actually broken down, but once the drug dog got to it, it went absolutely crazy. So you can guess what it was hiding out here, and that actually led on to some successful searches out in the desert. As you can see, it was actually the pilot that actually spotted that little white object in the desert, and then by the time we got cameras over to it, we confirmed what it was, and we're able to pass coordinates. So having a pilot's eye view can sometimes be extremely useful, and that's, from my operational experience, is true as well, both from operating UAVs and manned airplanes. We've also helped in kind of emergencies, and thankfully we haven't had any big ones down here, but we get a lot of flash flooding and things like that, and we can make assessments very quickly for both local government, and the law enforcement tends to be in control with those of those incidents here. What roads are passable, and anybody who's in distress because of that kind of weather and related emergencies down here. And then finally, we do as I mentioned, commercial work. This allows us to spend to be successful operator, to be able to provide low-budget law enforcement by the fact that we can support and get contracts for doing kind of environmental inspections and stuff. So how are we doing this? Well, this is our actual aircraft. It's a very light aircraft, as I mentioned. It's only 900 pounds. It's a 100cc engine, so it's not very fast. It can fly very slow, which is good. But the best thing about our aircraft is the visibility. Sitting forward of the wing with that big bubble canopy, we can see everything out of it. Fortunately for us, Magnaghi, which is the company in Italy that make this airplane, they invented this one, which is a commercially certified aircraft, something we need to be to have to be a commercial successful company. And they produced this specifically with observation in mind. It was originally designed to be a fire observation and spotting aircraft out in Italy. What they did with this aircraft is add additional electrical power and an extra generating on a separate power system. But they also built 2 camera bays into the bottom of it, which is where the real benefits of this aircraft are. You can see the kind of limitation, the kind of visibility we have out of the aircraft. That's us over the kind of New Mexico desert. But by keeping the pilot in it, we're not restricted at the time. We can go anywhere, anytime, any airspace, day or night. We're not restricted in any way, no COAs or anything else, which in rural New Mexico, where we wouldn't have a clue where we'd be from one day to the next, that's proved to be very useful. We normally fly with a police officer in the back of the aircraft, and if it's from whichever department we're working with, and we work, just to go into that a little detail, we work for a number of sheriff's departments down here over a very wide area, into Arizona, over into Texas, and then up into Colorado. So we can work for any of them if they require some sort of air support. And that's if they can't get hold of the state facility units, because obviously the state does have, there's 2 helicopters in the whole of New Mexico from the state police, which often isn't enough. But you can see that is actually the view the police officer gets in the rear seat, so you can imagine his visibility is pretty phenomenal as well, and that helps a great deal. Now, if you look down to the very bottom point there, I've put our patrol endurance. We can get 10 hours at it, but only with a single pilot. We start to run into weight problems, but that's where we're going at the moment. We can manage about 4 with both of us on board. In terms of landing, that's where we obviously need a road or something else, and the small UAVs really have the advantage to land pretty well anywhere. We need about 400 foot of road and about 600 to take off. And we have actually blocked roads with patrol cars and landed between 2 patrol cars on a road, and that's worked very well. The wingspan's only 32 feet, so we can get normally down single-lane carriageways and land. And that's been very much on on an emergency basis, and very much down to a decision made by the aircraft pilot at the time. So I mentioned we have 2 crew positions, and in the future we're actually going to remove one of those positions. But there's a kind of phased approach, much as Alan was mentioning, to achieving that. We are eventually removing the rear seat completely, and we're replacing that with a fuel system, not in the seat but actually in the wings, believe it or not. We are deploying out to our areas with our vehicle there, and the vehicle is actually towing our fuel trailer and spare parts trailer, etc. So we can pretty well deploy anywhere. That's the kind of distance that we're getting out of the aircraft at the moment, 100 nautical mile radius, and we hope to, once we deploy with 200 pounds removed from the back seat but replaced by fuel, then we'll be able to do about 8 hours over these kind of areas, which is, from our historical background and operating Predator and Reaper, that's been the great strength of UAVs, is their enduring time up in the air. Obviously we get to bladder limits at some point in the near future. In terms of deployment times for range, we're not that far, so it's taken us 4, 6, 8 hours to get right out. We can reach Vegas, but it takes us a day to get there. But it's generally speaking, we've been working inside the red ring or the green ring throughout most of our time. Our aircraft quite cleverly designed. The wings can come off and it can slide into the back of a vehicle, into a shipping container, into the back of a transport aircraft and be towed on a trailer. So that gives us some sort of deployment opportunities. Not that we've been there yet. So some little details really for later reading. There's too much detail on there now, but you can see we're only a 100-knot aircraft. We're not that fast. We stall pretty slowly. As we fit our new wings in the near future, we'll be up to 10 hours endurance. And when we buy a new engine, we'll go over to the fuel injection engine, and that gives us a 25% reduction. That will give us about 12 hours, and we really are at the end of human endurance at that point. So how do we go beyond that? And that's kind of where we go next. Some of the capabilities that we put on the aircraft at the moment, we have this thing from a company, the Eagle 360 from Aerial Innovations, and they produce a system that can fit onto the bottom of most aircraft. They have FAA approval for it, and it is quite literally 5 GoPros looking at all corners. You synchronize that data with GPS and synchronize it all together, and then you can produce that. All that video can be geo-referenced and then brought back to a customer. Very, very useful for us for search missions. We have fitted the UAV Vision CM160, and that's a day and night camera, and that can be actually remotely steered over IP. So over a data link, we can steer this thing from the ground. So you can see where we're going. Actually, we're working with UAV Vision so closely, they actually gave us their small camera as well, so we're going to have 2 gimbals on the aircraft eventually. So how does this build? Essentially, our aircraft has a Wi-Fi network sat underneath it and a radio network. So we can support the officers on the ground by giving them data up to the aircraft, and they can use a commercial cell phone, anything that can log into a Wi-Fi network, and they can see our downlinked video. We also have twin antennas and twin radios on it, so they can use us as a radio relay facility, important for rural locations. Additional to that, we're actually using data connectivity through it, so the same Wi-Fi network down to our ground vehicle and then out to a 3G, 4G, whatever connection we can get to the vehicle, and then out beyond if you, to an out-date data, which can be useful to the officers on the ground, particularly in some of our more rural areas. Our sites can be steered remotely, as I mentioned, using software that comes from the same company. And actually anybody, eventually we're hoping to, we've tested this already but we haven't actually deployed it, is to be able to, anybody in a dispatch room to be able to see this video, map display, where we're flying, etc. So that's kind of where we stand now. And if I push rapidly forward, you'll see that we're in a phased producing as well. We're at phase 1, we have 2 crew concept. We're about to very shortly go to remote sensor operations so we can operate through our ground vehicle. And then 3 and 4 are coming very shortly. With our manned operations, we're operating from in the aircraft with this kind of technology sat in the aircraft. But once we go to this remote split operations, we're starting to get some range out of the aircraft. Kind of 20 miles is what we're kind of saying we should be able to do, and we're very close to getting it. And we're hoping to be able to use a mesh system so that we can link through us to ground rebroadcast as well, and eventually to distributed operation if we can. But phase 4 has already existed on our airplane. It has flown as a UAV in the past, so it's not something new, and we're working with the manufacturer at the moment to go back there. Our aircraft has changed hands. The original owners went bust, and a much larger company, thankfully, has bought it now. So where Alan was mentioning the manufacturer and having a good manufacturer behind it, fortunately we have one that now builds all of the undercarriage for Airbus, so they're quite a large company, and we're working very closely with them. This is what we're working on, and this is where we're going shortly in the future. That glass cabinet that we can see out will hopefully disappear. And then the advantages of having a very large UAV available for commercial operations and law enforcement operations will hopefully come in the future. But what I wanted to show you really in this side is where we can get to if you remove the men out of aircraft that weigh 900 pounds. You end up with, if I bring you down to the third bullet, 84 gallons of fuel on board and 20 plus hours of endurance. Now my bladder's not going to make it past 10 hours, but 20 hours certainly not. And at 20 hours endurance, that's a considerable presence. That's an entire night over a city easily, no matter where you are in the country. And that's the kind of enduring operation that Magnagi and ourselves are kind of aiming for. This will be an eye in the sky for any major metropolitan police force, up at altitude, out the way, and enduring over top of a city. But interestingly, it's a certified aircraft at the moment, and we think with the large UAV requirements in the future from the FAA, that actually that certification is going to be key to gaining permissions to operate. So what we're working for at the moment, we're working for law enforcement, but by sharing fixed costs, we're working for a lower level than law enforcement where they normally couldn't afford some sort of air support. Remote infrastructure protection and high-value theft as a deterrent. some surrogate UAV training and commercial stuff as well, so that's managing us to share it. We're also doing a lot of UAV consultancy because of our previous time, but it tends to be on the larger side of UAV, not, as Alan was discussing, the smaller stuff, for people that want to go in that direction. And that's me. I overrun a couple of minutes. I do apologize.
Thanks very much, Dean. That's very interesting, and I think an approach to moving up the ladder to UAS technology for law enforcement that's a lot of them aren't considering, but maybe they should be. And appreciate you filling us in on that today. Our fourth and final speaker today is Anthony Galante. He's the lead instructor with the Unmanned Safety Institute. And so won't take up any more time. Please welcome Anthony as he talks to us about education in the UAS world.
Thank you, Patrick. Welcome. What I'm really going to be talking about is the integration of unmanned aerial systems really into the law enforcement agency. Okay. The Unmanned Safety Institute, who are we and what do we do? If you take a look at this slide right here, you can see that we have a vast array of experience, 30-plus years of defense, law enforcement, UAS operational experience. But ultimately, the Unmanned Safety Institute is a professional training organization for UAS operators organization focused on improving UAS flight safety through the adoption and modification of time-honored aviation safety and training practices. Again, Alan mentioned safety, safety, safety. That's really what we really need to focus on, especially being UAS being really new to the national airspace here. But we have everything covered from the USA Air Force. We've got pilots for RPA's Predators. They're on board with USI. We also have professors from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, one of the most prestigious aviation universities in the country, along with current law enforcement personnel. Who am I? My name is Anthony Galante. I've been with the police department here for the past 10 years in Central Florida. Currently, I have written or applied and received 3 separate colors, one for the Dragonflyer, the Cube, and the Indigo, all of which we have been developing and using these devices to really write our programs for the Unmanned Safety Institute. With our programs for the Unmanned Safety Institute, we offer really 3 certificate programs right now. The Visual Line system operator, we've got the professional system operator, and the CSO, or the commercial assist operator. And they really focus on hazard identifications, risk mitigation, safety management, flight planning, and provide best practice opportunities for that. That's who USI is, and that's what we do. We take a look at here, again, I think James had a similar slide with this in regards to what agencies currently have UAS deployed, and very successful deployments that are up here on the screen right now. Customs and Border Patrol was basically one of the first ones, along with Miami-Dade Police Department. The issues with Miami is that their airspace, they're covered by Class B airspace, which really prohibits them from flying multiple missions that they need to. But one of the starships out there is Mesa County Police Department. They have run over 55 separate missions. They have over 111 flight hours out there, and they have really integrated successfully UAS into law enforcement, which is really what we're talking about here. The public safety aspects, again, going last, everybody kind of predicated this, but we have being reactive and proactive. If you are part of a law enforcement agency right now and you're looking to get involved with it, or trying to get a UAS on board, being reactive, search and rescue, high-risk law enforcement activities such as search warrants going to be executed by SWAT teams. Hazmat incidents, we have overturned tractor trailers on a major highway. We're not going to send somebody up, take a look at, see what's in there. We can obviously use UAS devices to do that. large-scale fires, mass casualty incidents, whether it's domestic, international terrorism, or any type of active threat. For proactive intelligence gathering, we really want to kind of be careful with that. Again, we're going to talk about community and how do we get the buy-in from the community, because that's really going to be the most important thing, and that's kind of one of the out of the three presentations that you have seen here is community buy-in and why that's really so important. Surveillance, crowd control, infrastructure patrol, natural resource management, anything from looking at coral reefs to flying power lines and things of that nature, and agriculture use, which is going to be really one of the biggest one of the bigger users of UAS all the way around. So the first thing you really need to do if you're looking to integrate UAS into law enforcement is you need to figure out what your mission objective is. What part of your organization is going to run it? What wire diagram do you actually have? Is it going to come from your training division? Is it going to come from your admin or from your high liability team such as your SWAT team? What is your budget? Are there grants out there? What is the training? What training are you going to receive? Is it just going to be from the manufacturer itself? Is that sufficient for your insurance company? These are things that you really need to think about, and these are the things that you need to plan. As you have seen from the past two presenters, there are phases that you need to go through to accomplish your goals. What size agency are you? And where are you located? Are you in an urban environment or are you in a suburban environment? Do you have buildings? Do you have vast wooded areas where you're going to need long endurance, which is a major issue, especially with these SUASs, right? And then what type of missions will you be flying? We're going to be doing search and rescues. We're going to be doing a standalone over a single target or a LOI. So these are all things that really need to be answered even prior to purchasing. I think one of the biggest questions we get is, what is the best device, and what do you guys suggest? And really the questions that need to be answered is basically what is your mission objective, and then what is the temperature of the community? What is the state, county, city commissioners? James touched on the law avenue of it, and your community members. What is your relationship with your community at this point in time in regards to police and community relations? Is it good? Is it bad? Do you have chips in the bank per se with your community leaders? That's going to be very, very important. Some of the integration issues that come up are that IAC, International Association of Chiefs of Police, or IACP, has addressed in a letter they sent out. Also the FAA, obviously ongoing with the NPRM, a new proposed regulation that are out that we have next couple of weeks to comment on. And then we really do have some other external issues. With IACP, their aviation committee came out a couple of years ago, and they developed some very basic guidelines for operation, focused on safety, professionalism, respect, and really coming down to the most important thing, training standards and qualification. What is your training course? Has it been vetted? Who's it been vetted by? And what are your certification needs all the way around? Community engagement with the ICP, again, how do we empower the community? Really one of the better ideas that we've come across with is holding community meetings, getting along with city commissions and having their input and asking them, okay, here, and show them the device. You take out the mystery behind the madness side of it, and you ask them, what would you like for this device to be used for, and let them have direct input into the policy making, into the policy writing. System requirements, show them exactly what the system can and cannot do, understand and show them. You can do demo flights with them in your training co-op if you have one, or even inside, or operational procedures. What is the SOPs going to be? Again, you're going to empower them to help them to write this stuff or give input. So it's not new to them when it does come out, when they see something. They know exactly what's going to what the policies and procedures are. And image retention, ICP, and depending on the type of mission, obviously, really the concept of getting these SUAS devices up and on scene is to provide actionable intelligence at that point in time so that the command staff can utilize their resources, or their limited resources, to the best of the ability, right? So that really is kind of the concept. Going out and really just conducting surveillance, that is going to cause some issues here, which we'll talk about shortly. But the FAA, we all know with the COA, the COA, or the Certificate of Authorization. Again, formal permission from the FAA for operation. There's two different types. There's a training COA and operational COA. Again, only a public entity is allowed to attain. This is where you see major universities partner up with local law enforcement because the local law enforcement can apply for the actual COAs. Waivers for commercial entities are now available, especially with the Motion Picture Act, the 333 waivers that we have out there now, where they are allowing these UAS devices to get the shots that Hollywood wants flying in that specific area. So there are some exemptions to that. National policy, the 8900 see and avoid. Autonomous flight is not allowed right now. Loss link procedures must be given in detail for the COAs themselves. Prohibited from flying over very crowded spots. Here in Central Florida, we have a lot of big venues, especially over here in Daytona Beach. We have the Daytona 500, where we have several 100,000 people in the stands, and possible issues with drones flying over large crowds of that nature. Pilot qualifications, obviously having a private pilot's license as a minimum, and the Class 2 medical for operation of UAS at this point in time. Again, the suggested policy in the future is really being 17 years old and being certified or applying for an application from the FAA. So they really have gone from one end of the spectrum to the other. And again, most important, which Alan talked about, is really CRM training, or crew resource management. Right now, it is mandatory for flight attendants, pilots, dispatchers, for them to all have CRM, crew resource management. And with the 5th generation that we're in right now, which is error management, being able to identify the hazards and implying risk mitigation is going to be key and essential to any sort of training that is received. Some of the external issues, again, that are really impeding the UAS from moving forward are ACLU. What they're worried about is automated enforcement and mission creep. Okay, so we're just taking pictures of crime scenes right now, and we are taking pictures of rollover accidents to clear the accident scene quicker. Their fear is that that is going to move forward to continuous surveillance, and we have to preempt that. We have to take that pretty much off the table, and we have to have that in policy to make sure and have complete and total transparency as law enforcement agencies for the community, because the second that it looks like we're hiding something or something's not available, that's when you can have the community turn on you, as they did in Seattle. Politics, states in the process of enacting legislation. James did an awesome job of showing current legislation. Here in Florida, we definitely do have a anti-UAS law, but again, they have built in the 3 caveats which make it, which makes it usable. But basically, here in Florida, we're not, no law enforcement agency is allowed to use a UAS device unless one of the 3 criteria met, which are, credible intelligence exists indicating a high risk of a terrorist attack. The second one is we actually obtain a warrant, or we have reasonable suspicion, which is a very low in the criminal justice scale there. We have reasonable suspicion that swift action is necessary to prevent imminent danger to life, such as to facilitate the search for a missing person, to prevent serious damage to property, or to forestall the imminent escape of a suspect or the destruction of evidence. So those 3 caveats really kind of empower us to use UAS as law enforcement here in Florida. The economy is one of the biggest issues that everybody runs into, budgetary concerns and money, because these devices are not cheap and they do not fare well in water. I have water in my COA, and we'll just leave it at that. Community perception, again, what is the community perception when we talk about UAS? And there it is. 2 very prominent magazines here. We've got Wired, looks like the attack of the drones on the left side of your screen, and Time magazine itself, which is one of the most famous magazines in the world. We have a predator over a house, obviously photoshopped, but again, with the looming sky, with the gray sky in the background, media really is not doing us any justice or helping us. So what is the strategy to deal with this? Again, we're going to be reactive. We have to be completely transparent all the way through. There are going to be press conferences in regards to incidents and crashes and malfunctions that we've had due to the unreliability of most of these UAS devices at this current time. Lawsuits, state laws, again, we're going to be all reactive to that, but being proactive in regards to, again, community leadership all the way through, and community leaders, and having them have a say in operating procedures in regards to when we can and cannot use these. I'm not talking about safety issues. I'm talking about deployment of the device and when they would feel comfortable. Advisory committees would not be a bad idea to obviously be putting on demonstrations to take the mystery out of the device itself, having privacy policies in place, being completely transparent, knowing what the limitations on the use of your device actually are, and using the media to our advantage, being on TV, actually having webinars and doing just this, and having open forums for discussion to talk about it. And again, if there are any other questions, I think I did okay on time, but if there are any questions, unmannedsafetyinstitute.org, and that is my my web address. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Appreciate you being with us today and telling us about what's going on with USI. We do have time for a few questions that we can ask our group. One of the ones that I wanted to ask everybody about is, do you see the process for COAs evolving at all? And if so, what changes do you think might be coming down the line as far as law enforcement COAs? Alan, do you want to take a crack at that?
Oh, absolutely. Sorry. What do I see coming down the pike as far as law enforcement codes are concerned? I really think that the NPRM that was issued by the FAA last weekend, to a great degree when that becomes law, is going to negate the need for most agencies to seek a COA. Under the current guidelines shown in that NPRM, the only situation in which I believe that an agency would want to pursue a COA would be if they want nighttime operations. And I'm cautiously optimistic that input from the public might even convince the FAA that night operations can be conducted very safely by commercial operators and government entities. That's been our experience in Grand Forks, is that it's actually easier to see the aircraft at night. The weather is usually calmer. Less thermal activity. There's less, in most cases, manned aircraft activity. So to eliminate the possibility of being able to operate them at night under the proposed Part 107 of the Federal Aviation Regulations, I'm hoping that that's something that we can overcome. And if that, in fact, happens, I don't see any reason why an agency would want to pursue a COA. They would just operate under Part 107 of the Federal Aviation Regulations and be able to do just about everything that they would want to do.
Okay, thank you. James or Anthony, any
well,
Dean, any of you want to?
This is James. I think Alan's right on as far as the COA is really going by the wayside once 107 is implemented. And then things are going to shift a lot more to the state laws, because sure, you're going to be able to fly under the federal regulations, but still going to have to deal with a variety of state restrictions.
Okay.
This is Anthony. I agree. I totally agree with Alan. He makes a very valid point. Really, the purpose of the COA in the beginning was we had absolutely no idea how this was going to affect the national airspace, the national air system itself. So the FAA really kind of dug in deep and made it really, really difficult for anybody to kind of get a COA. That was for safety purposes, and now with the advancement with technology, with these small UASs right now, with more reliability, with people like Alan going out there and doing a fantastic job collecting this data, which is showing that this UAS is going to be more reliable. I think that is going to release the need for to be applying for these COAs as long as the reliability goes up and as long as we have a certification process in place.
Okay, thanks very much, Anthony. And this one is directed at Anthony and Dean. I was curious, as when it comes to the cost of deploying UAS technology, what kind of feedback are you hearing from the law enforcement agencies that you're dealing with about what they can do, how much they would like to do, and what it costs them to do it as far as budgets?
This is Anthony. Really, when you take a look at budget-wise, when I initially went up and talked to my bosses, they were kind of blown away at the price range for some of the devices. The low-end devices you can get away with anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000. But the high-end devices with really reputable companies, you're talking anywhere between $50,000, $60,000, and $75,000 for a device. So that becomes an issue. But there's ways to counter that. You can have a multi-agency device and have everybody kind of chip in. That's a great idea, but that's going to come into a lot of working between lots of chiefs and sheriffs within the same realm. When you take a look at manned aviation, it usually runs anywhere between, for a typical helicopter, it runs anywhere between $600 an hour. To operate a small UAS device at this point in time, the average is around $25 an hour. Again, with that force multiplied, with the force multiplier concept, it really is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the conduit between the two. This is why I see more interest in a light fixed wing than helicopters anymore. With the economy as it is, sheriff's departments just can't afford their rotary anymore. There's a major city not far from me that is in the point of closing its, again, another major city near me that's going to close down its air unit. It just cannot afford. There was a lot of programs with the military giving away free helicopters. That's fine, but then you've got to maintain the thing, and helicopters are hugely expensive to maintain. And partnering with a commercial operation or using a UAS keeps their air units viable because of the reduced costs. So yeah, it depends on your terrain and what the right tool is for that sheriff's department. So.
Okay, thanks, Dean. I had a question for James that stems from the UAS summit I attended last summer, and heard a really fascinating discussion between ACLU lawyer and some other legal experts, talking about laws that were on the books that already are designed to protect privacy, and I was really surprised at how much agreement there was between the lawyers and the people in law enforcement, and so I was just curious as to what James had to say about that. Is that going to be an area that's we need new laws, or is it something that we're already fairly well protected?
Well, I did not think that we needed new laws, but now we have them, and it's going to be interesting to see how they get interpreted, because I've gone through and read all of the state statutes now, all of them, and I have no idea what I would do if I was running a law enforcement program in one of the states with one of these laws, because they all read differently. Most of them are internally contradictory, and I think that this is going to create a lot more confusion and difficulty for law enforcement, and probably not really provide any additional privacy protection. We had very well developed Fourth Amendment case law and good statutes on the books, and law enforcement who is used to using aerial assets, and things were working okay. I don't know what's going to happen now. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we've made things more complicated, not less.
And anyone on the law enforcement side care to weigh in on that?
I can actually comment that a number of sheriffs have said to me that they're very scared of bringing UAVs or drones into their establishment because of a lot of them are elected officials, and it could make life very difficult for them. So in my case, a manned operation has been preferable for them. It's more so, it's more accepted, and I think it's just fear of the unknown. That's all it is. It's just literally that.
Patrick, Al Frazier with the Grand Forks Sheriff's Department. One of the things that I'm really hoping is that some of our listeners are in government positions, that there are maybe some legislators listening or legislative staff. And I think an important message is that legislation that protects our privacy that's technology agnostic is great. I don't think any of us would have much of a disagreement with that we want our privacy protected. But my fear with these pieces of legislature that focus like a laser beam on unmanned aircraft systems is, as was mentioned earlier, they tend in many cases to have contradictory language in them. They're all over the board as to what can be done in one state but can't be done in another state. That becomes very complex. There really isn't a central clearinghouse for a boilerplated law that states can, utilize or at least begin from ground zero to build from. So I would hope that the states that haven't enacted legislation, and even those that have, would reevaluate that UAS-centric legislation and think more of the future. Because as quickly as we're moving ahead with technology in a variety of different areas in our lives, I kind of shudder to think of being a street, law enforcement officer and trying to keep compliant with dozens of different laws, each of them dealing with a different type of technology. So I think that, a lot of that could be simplified with the drafting and going through the legislative process of more technology agnostic. With UAS, it's not about the aircraft flying up there. It's about what we're gathering from it. It's essentially a flying camera. And now what do we do with that? What do we do with those images? How are they safeguarded? How long are they archived? That is the important thing. And that would be similar to any technology that captures video or photographs, whether it be a pole cam or a Google car driving around your neighborhood gathering video that is then accessible on Google.
Okay, thank you very much, Al. Unfortunately, we are out of time today, and we have gathered all the questions that people have submitted online. I do apologize that we're not going to be able to get through them all today, but we will address them with our presenters and see if they will respond to the questions, and we'll try to get them to them. So right now I just want to do a special thank you to our sponsor today, which is the UAS Summit and Expo. And all registrants can get a $250 discount for general registration using the promo code webinar. So if it's something that you want to sign up for and register for, it's a good time to do it. Also want to thank all 4 of our presenters today, James, Al, Dean, and Anthony. Great talks. I learned a lot today from listening to you, and really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And I also want to thank everybody who registered for the webinar and sat in on it and listened to some great talks today. So I do appreciate you attending Aerial Assets, UAS, in Law Enforcement. And just to respond to one of the questions, has been recorded, and it will be posted on our website in roughly 7 days. You can use the same information that you logged into this webinar to log into it and view it again if you'd like to. So on behalf of the staff of UAS Magazine, wish everybody a good day, and thanks again for attending.